I want to take a minute to welcome everybody to a Thursday evening council meeting. And we are all here on Thursday night because we postponed our regular Tuesday night meeting due to a pretty epic blizzard that we all experienced through the past few days. And to provide a bit of context, this is only the 8th blizzard that the Reno National Weather Service office has called for our area since 1995. So why this is important is because it shows you how truly epic this storm was. I know a lot of us were talking up here on the dais who have been here for years that this was a pretty crazy event. In some areas of town, west end of Donner Lake, upper portions of Tahoe Donner, received about 8 feet of snow. So I really wanted to take a minute before we get into the meeting to thank our community. We ask you to prepare and stay off the roads. And this has helped us tremendously with our snow removal efforts and also our public safety related calls for service and needs. As a community, you certainly rose to the challenge and we appreciate your efforts to be prepared, stay home, and bring patience and kindness to these types of situations. You also have to thank our town staff. You have all done an epic job. I know many people have worked long hours, clearing our roads, helping predict what's coming storm-wise, and keeping us safe. So thank you also to all of the town staff. And we had a beautiful day today. It was great to see the sunshine again and what looks to be another beautiful day tomorrow. And we know we saw a little traffic today. We'll probably see again some tomorrow. So I know our town staff continues to work really hard to clear the roads even further, but we have to remember we have another storm coming this weekend, and it is projected to bring more feet of snow to our area. So I know the town staff is going to provide an update on the blizzard response and storm preparation in a little bit, but again, just really wanted to thank town staff for everything that you have done throughout the storm, and thank the community again for your patience, your kindness, and your respect. And please remember to continue to be prepared as we head into our next storm cycle. So with that, I will open it up to public comment. Any member of the public who is in attendance today is welcome to make a comment to the council. You are limited to 3 minutes, and if you would like to make a public comment, you are welcome to come on up to the podium. Seeing none, we will close public comment. And with that, we will head into our presentations. And I believe up first, we have Jen Calloway kicking us off to discuss our budget workshop, upcoming budget workshop.
Yes, great, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for being flexible and rescheduling to this evening. We appreciate that. It keeps us on track. So this is a really quick budget kind of kickoff discussion where we'll go over our timeline and just expectations as we are deeply involved in the budget preparation process. But before we get into that, just kind of some breaking news and kudos to our finance team. We got notification last week that the town has received the CSMFO award for budget excellence. It's one of 95 local jurisdictions that received this award for the current year's budget. So congratulations to Nikki and the whole admin team and all the staff that participate in the budget process on that. Wanted to acknowledge them. I have some noise happening here, sorry about that. Budget timelines. You've already had your council priority setting session. We've gotten some direction during that conversation about where we think your priorities lie and what we should be budgeting for, and the draft budget development as well as the work plan development. Those are coinciding nicely, so we know what we can put in the work plan for task items and how to budget for that appropriately. We have draft CIP budgets due from staff. We have all of those in at this point and are reviewing those. Draft operating budgets are coming up within the next few days. Depending on the storm system, maybe a little behind on that, but staff's doing a great job to keep on track with the schedule. Council review on April 13th. That's our marathon session where we go through and show you what we're planning and see if we're on track before we bring back the budget to you in May. I'll do a more in-depth review in April, middle of April this year. A little bit of a difference this year. I'm actually directly overseeing the budget process. We have a lot of staff shortages with transitions. So I'm going to relieve a little bit of that pressure and going to work on that. So that should be a little shorter review during April. In May, we start our budget workshops. Those are another marathon session where we'll go through the budgets in details and make sure that we have captured your priorities and expectations for capital projects and operating budgets, and that we are all on the same page. And then June 13th is when we're targeting to bring back for budget adoption. We will have the second meeting in June that we can adopt if something doesn't work out for the 13th. Also wanted to give you a little bit of the direction we've issued so far. I know this is a bit small. We are not planning on any new general fund positions unless it's a succession planning opportunity, which means it's a limited duration position. We do expect to have some positions out of our trails funding for the ongoing maintenance that we've taken on with the additional trails. But as far as general fund positions, not expecting that. Incorporating negotiating employee MOU increases that happened earlier this year, and funding priority capital projects, and I just named a few that we're looking at. These aren't meant to be discussed or have conversation about tonight, just to give you some context of what we think we've heard so far and what we're planning for on the priority front, but as well as our core services. And then we're going to switch things up a little bit this year, if council is okay with that. This is what you are used to seeing. It's the line item detail of the operating budgets. We are thinking from a policy perspective, you're probably not so interested in what we spend on postage each year in each department. So we are planning to summarize these in broader categories. So example, supplies and services, salaries and benefits, and make it a little bit of a more simplified visual for you. And then you also, instead of these kind of detailed descriptions, we'll have all this information should you want to see it, but in terms of presenting it in the budget book, we're going to make it a little bit more of a narrative that just explains the differences. So that's super quick, I know, but we just wanted to make sure the council and the community were aware that we are working on budget and this is the direction we're headed this year.
Thank you very much, Jen. And we'll hold questions till the end of our presentations. But up next, I believe we have Jen Calloway with the town manager report.
Thank you. I'm going to switch seats right here, and I'm going to end up handing it off to Bob Womack, our emergency management coordinator. But I did want to start off the conversation tonight. Mayor Womack, I echo a lot of the sentiments and words that you just shared. Really thank the community for being great partners in the storm response. It is incredibly helpful when we don't have cars abandoned in the street, not a lot of cars parked along the street, not a lot of calls for services. It really allows staff to focus on the work that they're doing to
recording in progress.
And I think we're recording now. Okay. I wanted to really do a shout out and thank you to our street crews and our snow removal crews. 8 feet of snow, as you mentioned, it's a lot of snow in a very short period of time. And to give you some context, I need a visual myself to understand the scope of work they're doing. And I heard this analogy and thought it was a good one to share. We have 160 miles of road in the town. So when our operators are out plowing, every time they go down, make one pass through, that's a trip to Napa when they cover all of the roads in town. When they come back with their second swipe, that's Napa and back to Truckee. Then you do that all over again with the blowers. So that's a lot of travel in a very short period of time, 24 hours a day that our roads crews are out doing in order to keep the streets passable. So, big thank you to them and for all their hard work that they're doing. And also the patience of the community. I know some of the roads are still pretty narrow, but they're all passable at this point, and we'll see if we can keep that up through the weekend, depending on how many feet of snow land in some areas of town. Also, can't go without saying a thank you to Bob Womack, Emergency Management Coordinator. This is exactly why the town has this position. Many of you probably don't know in the community, Bob prepares daily situational reports that we share out. He's monitoring storm situations, traffic, working with CHP, Caltrans, all of our partners in preparations, of course with Chief Renfro and our entire public safety crew and our PIOs. Bob was here until 4:30 in the morning shoveling out the Red Cross trailer during the middle of the blizzard so that we could open up a shelter for our neighbors that were impacted by the avalanche. So there's a lot of work that happens that is just not seen, and I think it's important to recognize that level of commitment and dedication. So thank you, Bob, for all of that extra work. And I am going to turn it over to you in just a minute. We're in preparation mode. Another storm is coming, as you mentioned. We have a lot of safety concerns, and Bob's really going to speak to those. There's heavy snowloads on roofs, carbon monoxide poisoning. We expect there's going to be a lot of traffic again in town coming this weekend, and the risk of people not being able to leave town early next week. So really want to ask the community to, again, work with us if the roads are bad or impassable, to stay home, have supplies at home, be prepared. That really does help speed up our efforts. And then we have worked in coordination with Nevada County to send a letter to Caltrans, and we've asked them to be very conscious of opening up 80 so that it's only open when there's through traffic, meaning people can't get stuck here in Truckee. They have an option to go to Sacramento or Reno. So we sent that yesterday. And then we have also had conversations with our partners in Placer County, the ski resort areas, about messaging, and they really focused on some of the safety hazards in the area. So we appreciate them being receptive to that conversation. Now, Bob, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. Normally this would come out in paper form, but I'll probably do the same briefing that I would do any other day, but we'll do it in the verbal. And as Jen mentioned, there was really continuous snow from Sunday midday until Wednesday morning, with anywhere from 2 to 8 feet, depending on where you were in town and whether the drifts were blowing into your house or blowing around. Most of the roads in town are at least one lane. Many now are 2 lanes, although that is work in progress, obviously, in the discussion about how much it takes to get a blower through even on a single cut. The goal is to try and get a single cut through on every road so that if it does snow what's expected this weekend, that there'll be somewhere to put it. Ski slope is back open. They were able to punch through yesterday evening, so that's open end to end. But again, that's one of those roads where it sits with all the wind blow that occurs up there. It closes, and it's a little bit difficult for folks up there. Potentially could see something similar now that it's really just a big channel that wants to fill in. Obviously, we know I-80 is open. Lanes remain narrowed, so we would suggest anybody that's driving that to be super careful. And I have seen a couple reports of snow sliding off the edges back into the lanes, which could be kind of unexpected. So, for folks that are driving out there, be aware of that. As the mayor mentioned, traffic was very heavy this morning, again, to the ski areas. That's probably a combination of ski traffic and people trying to get to work, a normal commute day. I would expect it will look very similar tomorrow. CHP is planning to run the West River 89 South traffic pattern tomorrow morning. Again, that is always staffing dependent because they're staffing that with their on-duty staff. So if it goes like it was this morning where they were all responding to crashes, it's a little hard to run that. But they do plan to do that. And we are working with CHP and Caltrans for this weekend. We'll talk more about that in a moment. The east end of the county and the town have really been lucky in terms of power outages. We've had almost none. I always say I haven't had any. I don't know of any. I was watching the maps. That's not true on the west end. As of the last count I had, it was midday, they still were 13,000 out. We primarily in town are natural gas. Certainly there is some propane tanks, but primarily natural gas. The west side is primarily propane, and there is a shortage. It has to do with a bunch of things that happened earlier in the winter, but they are starting to run into similar what they saw in 2021-22, where people are running out of firewood, running out of propane, don't have heat. And so they are actually performing helicopter rescues of people up in the foothills, particularly in the North San Juan area. So, as we think about here and what we're facing, there's certainly across the county big issues. The state did declare a state disaster, a state of emergency for 13, I've seen both 13 and 14 counties. Nevada being one of those counties. That means we're already under that declaration, so we will be tracking costs and things like that in terms of this storm because there is a reimbursement possibility there. As Jen mentioned, the avalanche at 7 o'clock on Tuesday, fairly significant, particularly in the area was kind of, I'd say, unexpected. It's just an area that it doesn't seem to happen like that. It did travel a long distance, so that is somewhat concerning for us in that we have a few avalanche areas in town. Not a lot of them, but the kind of thing you think about when you think about an avalanche, usually you figure there's plenty of buffer on the areas we were at. There was plenty of buffer in Olympic Valley, and it still reached those condos. Big shout out to the rec district for helping us get that building open and having somebody there while we were trying to get logistically stuff over to it. Red Cross has volunteers in town. Their paid staff is on the other side of the hill, but their volunteers are able to do anything their paid staff is. And so they were able to stand that up, and we do have the ability to shelter. They were able actually to find a different location for the trailer. It's now over at the CHP office in one of their garages. So no more digging, at least not for this year. But that's more to follow on that. And then also to DPW, not only for the roads, but they were able to plow out some berms that got left, say left, and it's what happens in town, right? Berms in front of the rec district, and then also some of the parking lot, so we had a place to put people. And so we ultimately wound up with one family there. There were, at one point, it was about 75 residences that were given evacuation notices. It was a warning, so they could stay, and many did. But about 25 left from there, and there was a thought that of that 25, most of them could be coming here because they left. It turned out that of that group, only one wound up here. So, as we talk about with evacuations, anytime in this area, very problematic. We usually figure 10% of the population will wind up at a shelter. It's probably much less here, 2 or 3%. So that creates even more because you have to open a shelter, but maybe it's not as large as it would be otherwise. Just a couple of tips, as the town manager mentioned. Big thing is before driving, ask yourself if you really need to make the trip. Is it really important to be going wherever you're going? You may have heard me say, I remember this conversation, I stopped somebody, they were doing something when I was on patrol, and I said, well, where are you going? In the middle of a snowstorm, blinding snow. And they're like, well, we have to go down to the gas station to get gas. I'm like, you're already at home. Whatever gas you have in your car is what you have. And they're like, no, we got to go down tonight and get it. Okay, once you make it home, that's a good place to land. If you wind up trapped in your car during blizzard or gridlock, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about this weekend. Keep the area around your exhaust pipes clear if you're stranded to avoid carbon monoxide poisoning. Really unfortunate thing, but it does happen. And the Weather Service is already talking about if people do come this weekend, there is potential if they get stranded that they're going to be there for a long time. So this is a good thing to think about. Watch for snow shedding off roofs and from trees. It's really super easy to get buried. We've obviously seen that over the years. Big thing here, don't let children play near where snow sheds, underneath roofs, areas that get plowed. Don't let them make snow forts on roadside banks. Don't let them make tunnels in the snow along the roadside. All these things that we've seen over the years. So it's just really super dangerous. Again, avoid carbon monoxide poisoning. Never heat your house with gas stovetop or oven. Big reminder from Southwest Gas, clear gas mains and carbon monoxide vents, the exhaust vents. Both Southwest and Truckee Fire are having to respond to numerous gas calls, carbon monoxide calls, due to blocked vents. Luckily, we've not had any bad outcomes, but people have had high CO, carbon monoxide levels inside their house primarily because their vents are getting blocked where their heaters are because they weren't planned on having this high of snow. Snow should not be over your heater vent. If you're on propane, make sure you keep the top of the tank clear. That's an engineering issue as to what that happens, but basically it can wind up in a leak. And we have seen that on the summit 2 weeks ago. We had a house explode, kind of related to that. Sledding and snow play on the streets, simple answer, don't. Please, that's not the place to be. Yeah, I know. Don't play on roadway edges where blowers are operating for obvious reasons. And then another one that the fire department wanted me to remind everybody, fire hydrants, adopt your fire hydrant. You know, there are more fire hydrants than anybody's going to get to on the governmental side, whether that's BUD or the fire district. But the time it takes to dig out a fire hydrant will probably mean the difference between saving and losing your house in a fire. And particularly in some of these places now where we're talking about 10 and 15-foot snowbanks, if you could start early before the stuff gets incredibly hard and has gone through a couple of freeze cycles, much easier to dig out. Really about a 2 to 3 foot space around it is great because they got to get the hose on the thing, and it takes up some space. So if you can, adopt your local fire hydrant, post pictures on Facebook. Everybody else does it. It's great. You know, get a little recognition for the backbreaking work you're doing. So, looking forward to the weekend. Town management and myself have already been meeting in preparation for the weekend. Reno National Weather Service reached out earlier today to me to say, hey, we have some real concerns that people are going to be able to make it here on Friday and Saturday early in the morning and then not be able to make it home. And so their messaging that has gone out has been pretty specific to that. I've seen 3 or so different messages, and their latest winter storm warning is basically, if you get here, expect you're not going home until Monday or Tuesday if you're planning to be here on Sunday. Snow amounts, they're looking at about 1 foot to 2 feet on the high end in town, 2 to 3, maybe 4 on the high end at the upper reaches of TOT. But again, with narrowed roads, no place to put some of this snow, we're really starting to talk about this is not it's a great epic year for skiing and all that, but we're running out of places to put the snow. So DPW focusing on the main roadways and preparation of traffic issues. They're going to make sure they get Donner Pass Road buffed out. And like I said, try and get a single blower cut across all the rest of the roads if they can. It takes a certain amount of time to do that. And with as much snow as there is in some of the places, it takes really good operators not to cause damage as they're trying to blow that snow back. Can't hit houses and cars. And then the police department is upstaffing patrol to cover the expected issues and try and reduce response times. But nonetheless, it still takes a while to get somewhere. So people need to understand when they call 911, we will get there as fast as we possibly can, but we have to get there safely. And the same thing is true with the fire department. And we are also now, we reached out to the new CHP commander, and he's actually, I kind of like listening to a technological guy. He's like, I got some ideas how we can communicate even better. And so those things are hopefully in the works for this weekend, more real-time communication with CHP and Caltrans, not just good communication, but the rather instantaneous roads open, roads closed kind of stuff, even more than waiting for emails. So that's pretty much a wrap up of everything that's going on right now. We love the snow, drought might be over, but in the forecast we have a fair amount more coming.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks for giving us a little bit more time than we usually take on the town manager's report. We thought some of those safety updates were important, and really want to acknowledge the work of our communications program managers and PIOs. Please share our safety messages and notifications out on social media with your constituents and anybody else. We're going to be putting out a lot of that over the next few days. We've had a lot out, and they've been working over the weekend to provide those updates. And then lastly, we still have our communications survey open and hoping people will take that. Again, that's to provide feedback on how we can best provide our community with information and what type of information they would like to receive. So you can find that survey on our website or on social media. And that's all we have tonight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all of that information and all the tips. Those are good to remember. So with that, we'll go to questions or comments from council. We'll start Councilmember Klopstad.
I do have a couple of comments. First of all, thank you so much, Bob, for shuffling out the trailer, and I'm so glad you don't have to do that anymore. And for all your many hours and reports. They're incredibly beneficial to myself, and then, you know, helping me keep my friends and family and constituents informed. The Public Works team, seriously, this has been such a challenging time. I feel like I want to bring you guys all cookies. It's, you know, it's just amazing. Thank you for your patience and for your dedication and continuing to show up and do a very difficult job. The communications team, as you mentioned, this has been really tough. You know, we're kind of threading needles here. So they've done a great job. Very impressed, very happy with the messaging that's coming out. I know we're working with our good neighbors, the ski resorts and Placer County, and they're sending some messaging out, and we're challenged. We're really challenged with this. It's I understand the difficulty of telling people not to come and that they tend to not listen to that, but particularly after what we just went through and what we have coming this weekend, I really hope people think it through. And then, you know, the Truckee Police Department, I know your team not only has to do these incredibly challenging 12-hour shifts where you're doing triple duty of, you know, responding to crashes and calls for help and trying to manage traffic, but your team is often traveling through that blizzard to get here and then back again. And I just am so grateful. I want our community to understand that and be patient when you are directing them, because I know sometimes they're not very happy about what you're trying to tell them. So please, out there, you know, be patient, be respectful, be understanding. Everybody that's showing up is really going above and beyond the call of duty for all of this. So deep admiration for your team and their commitment as well. And I just have to double down on the don't slid into the roadway thing. I am running into this all the time. Parents, please don't let your kids sled into the roadway. It is a really bad idea. Especially right now with how high the snowbanks are, you can't see what's going on. So, yeah, thanks.
Vice Mayor Pallavi?
Guys, you can go really fast because the snowbanks are so high. You're all a bunch of downers. Jeez. Maybe not on Glenshire Drive where I live, but maybe those other roads are better for that. Certainly not mine. Just a quick question, Bob, Jen, maybe even Danielle. Any school updates? I know one of Danielle's not sitting in her other role with her other hat on, so we can focus on town staff. But school updates would be great. I know some of those kids at home are ready.
School is on for tomorrow.
Wow, really?
Yes.
Great.
Just got confirmation.
Great. And, you know, I just wanted to also mention, I know some of the reasons they were giving out, you know, the buses can't turn around, things like that. So, and I know we're also obviously dealing with multiple counties, 3 counties and multiple jurisdictions, all doing snow removal there. So if there is a way that, you know, keeps the kids moving, I think that's something that we should just be aware of and considering. Obviously, we're not going to abandon anybody else out there. Yeah, I will just ditto and echo everything that's already been said. I don't think it needs to be said again. It's been a wild week and it's going to continue on. So thanks to everybody who's been out there working on it. And I don't have any further questions. I will say on your budget presentation, personally, I'm very refreshed. I think that budget is in dire need of some updating. So thank you for a fresh approach. And I look forward to seeing the results and what you bring forward to us. So thank you.
Councilmember Zabriskie.
As Vice Mayor Pallavi indicated, I think all of us up here appreciate how eloquently, Councilmember Close expressed our appreciation for everything the staff has done. I do have two questions. One is, do you think there's anything more that the Nevada Department of Transportation could be doing to dissuade people returning from Reno to think twice about continuing past Gold Run? And then secondly, have you already exhausted efforts to reach out to media in the Bay Area and in the Sacramento Valley about adding a line in their newscast or weather reports about whether they wouldn't say something to discourage travel over the pass?
Be happy to kind of take both those. I had the opportunity to drive through the Bird Eye traffic a couple of times this week, and we owe those guys more than we know. What we all used to see is down there in even a more confined space. There is just no room down there. Trucks basically stack across all 3 lanes. It's only 2, but they stack 3. And then vehicle traffic starts driving on the dirt and center divide until a truck gets in the way of that. This morning there were 7 NHP out there trying to untangle the mess. So it has been beyond beneficial to us to have traffic, particularly the big rig traffic, held down there versus up here. But at the same time, they're getting the same kind of snow, not in the same quantities, but and then the trucks can't move around down there, and they end up sliding all over and doing everything we see here. So yeah, I really feel for our Nevada partners. I did not mention, and I should have, Nevada Department of Emergency Management reached out to me this morning, said, what do you need? That's problematic because we have to do some by-state stuff when we do that, but they're there, they're thinking about us. So I would say that, you know, to the extent, there probably isn't more they can do to dissuade it. The road signs all say the same thing, road's closed. And actually it wasn't bad during the closure, it's when it starts to open. And of course everybody has learned they can come to work. And so whether they're essential or not, even on those days they're coming to work. So traffic has not been significantly light, other than missing trucks. As to reaching out, one of the things we've been talking about is resurrecting our old public release or public information releases that we did. And you know, old school, sending it to fax machines and email addresses to a wider audience. Just like you said, to see whether or not we can catch some folks down there. Code Red does work outside of the area. In other words, if they're registered here and we send a Code Red, they'll get it at their home. So it's based upon where they register, not where they're at the moment. So or at least for email, text is a little bit different. So we'll probably be doing something like that tomorrow also. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Zabriskie. I did have one question on messaging, and I don't know if Jen or Bob, but in kind of these regional conversations, has VTT been a part of those as well? So that way they are pushing out similar messaging to what we're talking about?
Yes, they have. Both Colleen and Siobhan have been participants in, I think, all of those conversations, or at least one of them in all of those conversations. And BTT immediately shared the agreed upon messaging as soon as it was finalized.
Great,
They're
thank
very
you.
supportive.
Mayor, can I just ask one more quick question? So in that effort that you were talking about, creating a thoroughfare, so clearly yesterday that wasn't the case, right? Eastbound was open, westbound was closed. There was a good 8-hour gap there. Is that sort of what we're trying to avoid? Are those things, or that one was kind of okay because people were outside? Like the 2 chain checks were far enough off the hill in both directions, or was that a good scenario, or is that a scenario we're encouraging Caltrans in your communications to avoid, I guess?
I may not be following. If you're asking, do we think it's a good idea to chain check and everything is down at Bird Eye?
No, we know that. That's a good one. What I guess I'm asking is, I've seen a couple of communications that have come across just on the thoroughfare concept of not having one direction open with the other direction closed, but yet that was the environment that we had yesterday, right, for a good 8 hours or so when eastbound was open, westbound was still closed. So my question is simply, is that what we're advocating to have both open at the same time? That yesterday was what we are trying to avoid, was the question.
No, what we're talking about is not opening it from Reno to Truckee and then closing it at Truckee.
Truckee, I see.
So
Got it.
whichever side is open or not. I mean,
Okay.
to be clear, it is very rare that you cannot get to Reno from Truckee.
Right.
And essential workers can get from Reno to Truckee. But when we're talking general, we didn't want to have them open 80 and only open it to Truckee and then have everybody show up here. We wanted them to open it the whole way. That does lengthen the opening process, but it makes sense conceptually, and I think they understood that.
And are they looking towards that tactic moving forward? Are you getting like positive responses, or is it a black hole of communication?
We had Caltrans representation on the CCC meeting yesterday, and that's what generated the letter that we wrote to Caltrans with Nevada County, really trying to just prevent any stoppage in Truckee, right? Like they need to be able to leave Truckee whenever possible. I have not seen a response back from that letter. I will say the representative at the CCC meeting was open and receptive to the idea and said he would share that communication with his team. We just didn't, I'm sure they were busy doing other things besides writing back to us.
I was more trying to understand the environment that we were looking for from an ideal perspective. So yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. With that, I'll open it up to public comment on the presentations. Seeing none, we will close public comments. And thanks again, Bob, Jen, and all of town staff. All right, up next, we have our consent calendar. And on the consent calendar, we have item 6.1, minutes from the February 22nd closed session and February 14th regular meeting. We also have item 6.2, Coldstream Road Roundabout Project, C1712, notice of completion. Item 6.3, Brockway Road Wall Artoclectica contract award. Item 6.4, Sustainable Communities Grant application for Downtown Truckee Railroad Pedestrian Crossing Plan. 6.5, opposition to initiative number 21-0042A1, the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act. Item 6.6, interest forgiveness for Alder Pacific Associates 2 loan. And item 6.7, 2022 Public Service Center Fueling Station C2021 Construction Contract Award. Would any of my fellow council members like to pull any consent items?
I don't know procedurally how you would like to handle 6.1, the minutes. Manager.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, so we did provide alternative language in the responses, and you can make a motion with adopting that language without pulling it.
Okay.
If that language is
Pull
acceptable.
6.1 to adopt staff's recommendation to correct the minutes.
So you're pulling 6.1? Or you could make a motion to approve all the consent calendar with the one amendment to 6.1? So that there's a motion? Well, I guess we have to check with public if public would like to pull any items from consent. And staff? Okay. So is that a motion, Councilmember Zabriskie?
Yeah, I just moved that we correct the minutes to reflect what occurred and I'm fine with the way staff describes the change.
Perfect.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to discussion item 7.1, the short-term rental workforce housing token pilot program guidelines and requests for proposals.
To reflect what was in the
And Lynn will be presenting, hopefully with an acronym.
All right.
Sorry. Hello, I'm here to present the proposed program guidelines and request for proposals for the short-term rental workforce housing token pilot program, which we call the token program. The Truckee North Tahoe region is experiencing a significant shortage of rental and for-sale housing affordable to people with jobs in Truckee and surrounding communities. The town is proactively working to address this shortage on numerous fronts, including supporting the development of income-restricted affordable housing, offering workforce rental grants to property owners to incentivize leasing to regional employees, supporting the development of accessory dwelling units, and the successful launch of the Truckee Home Access Program. The token program is a new housing program concept that will provide the town an additional tool to facilitate development and deed restriction of workforce units. It's an innovative approach to workforce housing creation. While many jurisdictions, including Truckee, use deed restriction purchases to ensure long-term workforce housing, the token program's exchange of transient occupancy registration certificates for deed restrictions will be piloting a truly innovative workforce housing program concept. The token program is similar in concept to the Truckee Home Access Program, through which the town offers to purchase deed restrictions on eligible workforce housing units. However, the token program framework offers in-kind payment in the form of short-term rental tokens rather than cash. A program participant would be required to deed restrict the workforce housing units for 15 years, which sets legal limits on the use of property for that term. Each award of tokens will require council approval. So this is an overview of the key concepts of the token program and what makes it unique compared to other deed restriction programs. The token provides an opportunity for interested program participants to create workforce housing units in exchange for a specific number of tokens that are redeemable for transient occupancy registration certificates, which are required to register short-term rental in Truckee. This token will be valid for the term of the workforce housing deed restriction. Another key concept is that the tokens are transferable between properties, different short-term rental properties. A token holder who owns multiple eligible short-term rental properties can cancel the certificate associated with their token and then use the token to register another eligible property that they own. Finally, tokens can be transferred, traded, or sold. The new token holder can use the token to qualify for a registration certificate for an eligible property they own, or they can also transfer, trade, or sell it. So as a reminder, the token program was developed after recommendations that came from the short-term rental ordinance and stakeholder process. This is an abbreviated timeline of the token program covering the past year. So in spring of 2022, the amendments to the short-term rental ordinance were adopted, including a 1,255 registration certificate cap. The pilot program was developed and 25 certificates were allocated by council to this program. The registration was open and the wait list started. In the fall and winter of 2022, with Bay Area, BAE Economics helped us do evaluation analysis. We held a stakeholder workshop where we presented the program framework to the stakeholders. We did development and revision based on feedback from the stakeholders and also staff that'd be involved with short-term rentals and housing. In winter 2023, we brought the program framework to council, and we worked on the program guidelines and RFP that we're bringing to council tonight. As far as the future, if approved, we plan to release the RFP in spring 2023. In summer of 2023, the proposal selection and token allocation, and throughout 2024, we'll do program review and ongoing monitoring. So the program guidelines cover workforce housing units, use of tokens, and other program requirements and restrictions. We're not going to go over every single thing in the guidelines, but we're going to highlight the most important parts. So the workforce housing units will be deed restricted for a term of 15 years. And as a reminder, a deed restriction is a binding agreement that places long-term restrictions on a property, such as income limits, occupancy, or use requirements. These are the proposed restrictions for the workforce housing units, specifically in the token program. They must be a long-term rental unit for the term of the deed restriction with a lease period minimum of 12 months, and it cannot be short-term rented or used as a bed and breakfast or ski lease. Any proposed lease and each tenant, subtenant, or roommate tenant must be approved in advance by the town. They must be occupied by a household whose income does not exceed the income requirement as outlined in the deed restriction, which is a program maximum of 150% AMI for adult resident, which is currently 103,350 as of March 2023 and is adjusted annually. Each workforce housing unit will have a maximum AMI specified in the deed restrictions, which in some cases may be lower than the program maximum. 50% of the adult residents must work full-time within the TTUSD boundaries. There's a maximum rent rate of 30% of the AMI income specified in the deed restriction adjusted for bedroom size, so the rents have to be affordable. The residents must occupy the unit as their primary residence 10 out of 12 months of the year. The deed restriction runs with the land, which means that during the 15-year deed restriction, if the unit is sold, the deed restriction will stay with the property. It does not renew for another 15 years upon sale, just continues the existing term. And the proposed tenant qualifications and occupancy requirements are aligned with the current lease locals program requirements. Lease lentils is a different program. So this is a pretty key part of our program guidelines, is what happens if the workforce housing unit defaults on its deed restriction. So if the owner of the workforce housing unit defaults on the deed restriction, the town will revoke all tokens held by the owner, and the owner will be banned from participating in the token program or registering an STR for 5 years. Revoked tokens will be returned to the token pool. If the tokens associated with the workforce housing unit have already been sold, traded, or transferred, the workforce housing unit owner will be required to pay $25,000 per token. And if they've sold some and still had some, it's both, for each token. So here are the basic eligibility requirements for the workforce housing unit. The unit must be located within the town of Turkey boundaries, but does not need to be co-located with a short-term rental. It can be new construction or an existing housing unit. For new construction, the project must have completed entitlement prior to the program application. The unit may not already be deed restricted based on local employment or income restrictions, and it can't have any open code violations. The guidelines also outline the requirements and restrictions around the use of tokens. The tokens will be issued upon proof of certificate of occupancy and the recordation of the deed restriction of the County of Nevada. The token can only be exchanged for a certificate for a property that is eligible to be short-term rented per our municipal code. A short-term rental property that receives a certificate through the token program is subject to all the requirements of the Town of Truckee Municipal Code. The token holder can cancel the associated certificate for a short-term rental property and then apply to the town to reuse the token to receive a certificate for a different eligible property. But each application for reuse will be reviewed to confirm that the proposed short-term rental property meets all the requirements to be short-term rented. Each token is issued with an expiration date that is concurrent with the end date of the deed restriction associated with that token, and upon expiration, the certificate associated with the token will become void and returned to the token program pool. If the token program is still in effect at the end of the term, by mutual agreement, the town and the owner, the deed restriction and token can be extended for an additional term. Due to council and staff feedback, we added 2 additional requirements for the use of tokens. After 36 months of non-use, a token will be deemed inactive and returned to the token program pool. If a certificate associated with the token is revoked, for example, as a result of short-term rental ordinance violations, the token will be revoked and be returned to the token pool. In both scenarios, the deed restriction will remain in full force and effect for the remainder of the deed restriction term. Tokens can only be sold, traded, or transferred between token holders and short-term rental properties a maximum of 3 times per calendar year. The town must be notified in writing when a token holder wishes to transfer the token to a different eligible property or to transfer the token to a new holder. And before the sale, trade, or transfer of a token, the current token holder must provide the recipient with a token transfer and disclosure form which outlines the rules around the tokens. And a signed version of the form must be provided to the town before the certificate will be issued. So as previously mentioned, due to the variance in the local short and long-term rental market, we're not recommending a set exchange ratio of tokens per workforce housing unit provided. Instead, we're proposing the use of a request for proposals application process in which interested applicants can submit the number of tokens they'll accept for each proposed housing unit. We will issue a request for proposals for interested applicants to submit proposals with a response period of 90 days. And to simplify the application, or the RFP process for applicants, we created a token program application which includes project information, like number of workforce housing units proposed, unit type, unit size, including bedrooms and square footage, the project status and the tenant income cap, sustainability features, and the number of tokens the applicant is willing to receive in exchange for deed restricting the workforce housing units. Town staff and an ad hoc committee will review proposals based on the selection criteria I'll go over shortly. All proposals that meet the minimum qualifications will be presented to Town Council along with recommendations for the allocation of tokens. Town Council will give the final approval to select proposals and allocate tokens. There were no major changes to the selection criteria since our initial proposal. We're proposing 5 categories to be evaluated. Because some of the selection criteria are qualitative, proposals will be evaluated in comparison to each other, not against a quantitative scoring rubric. So first up is project readiness. So if, for example, proposed housing units will be prioritized if construction is closer to completion for new housing units. Tenant income limit, so the program has a maximum tenant in AMI of 150% average per adult, but the applicant could propose a lower income cap, and a lower income cap will be considered as a preferential criterion. The proposed ratio of unit size, so the number of bedrooms to the number of tokens requested. Workforce housing unit sustainability features, so like location within half a mile of transit, sustainable building methods, on-site composting, etc. And the current use of housing unit, conservation or preservation. So the program will prioritize conversion of existing units that are not currently used as primary residence housing to get the most value out of the 15-year deed restriction. So here's our anticipated timeline for the RFP. It's already early March, but outreach and marketing plan will happen in early March. Then we'll release the RFP in mid-March with a 90-day response period. The staff and ad hoc committee will review proposals in June and July of 2023. The proposals will be presented to council in summer of 2023, and the council will allocate the tokens and give final approval in summer of 2023. We recommend that council approves the short-term rental workforce housing token pilot program guidelines and requests for proposals, direct staff to request proposals for the token program, and authorize the town manager to make minor administrative changes to the guidelines if necessary. If the council approves the guidelines and RFP process, like I said in the timeline below, staff plans to release the RFP in mid-March and bring proposals to council in summer of 2023.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Appreciate that. So we will start with questions. Vice Mayor Pallaby, starting with you, any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Lynn, and I've been a part of this process mostly from the beginning, so I'm fairly familiar with it. Just a couple of quick things that I think either I missed or we need to get ironed out. But we're going to come back in the summer of 2023 after we hopefully get a proposal, or maybe more than one, and we're going to have 25 tokens, aka, and a token is equal to a permit, just for the sake of being consistent. What happens if we, basically those 25 are at our purview as long as we want to keep them in our purview for the foreseeable future. So we can allocate one, we can say put 20, we can allocate one to this program, we could say put 24, back to the wait list if we want to. Is that kind of our next decision-making point on how to handle that 25 tokens, basically?
In the RFP, we do state that we can allocate, or you can allocate up to 25 between 0 and 25. Hillary, I'm not sure, are we able to put those ones not used back into the?
We certainly could, and I think that would be part of the conversation with council when we bring back recommendations, would be, do you want to allocate some, do you want to allocate all? If you don't want to allocate all, what would you like to do with the remainder?
And then also, just to be clear, let's say, I'm just trying to understand how this all might work. If we do choose to allocate, whatever happens, right? Let's say we just want to eliminate these 25 from sort of being out there. and then we come back 6 months later or whatever our cadence is going to be on this RFP process, we are not beholden to our cap within this token program.
That's correct. So the short-term rental ordinance gives council the authority to issue tokens either below or above the cap. So you could say this program was wildly successful. We'd like to take the next 50 tokens at turnover and set 25 of them aside for the token program for the future. Or you could say, we're happy with the number we have that are not restricted by the token program. We want to allocate additional short-term rental certificates above the cap of 1255. That's also a possibility under the ordinance.
Right. And then my last question is basically just that the whim of these tokens will be at the whim of council in an ongoing way, right? So I guess what my question it really is do we run the risk in the long term? I think the way that we have it set up in the short term is actually perfect, right? We have no idea what we're doing. We're kind of throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall. We're going to see what works, and we absolutely should be doing it that way without putting too many barriers on this. So I'm okay. I'm super comfortable with the way that we're executing this over the next maybe 3 years or so. I guess maybe it's a question or a comment, but one thing that sort of does it changes my thought process is the number. This isn't necessarily going to be even allocation over the long term or a period of time, because we're basically saying these are at the will of council. Council might say, wow, that particular scoring mechanism is amazing and we all support that thing, so we're going to give you 25 tokens just because you did X, right? That might not be the case 5 years down the road. It might be a very different council, political winds shift. So is there an anticipation that we are going to start to hone this thing in if we actually see applications, if we see things coming in, so that it isn't so unpredictable maybe over that 5 to 10 year horizon? Is that thought process happening?
It's hard to know how things are going to go. But we do hope that if this program is successful, that we will start to have some kind of valuation of what the token is. I mean, that's part of the challenge right now, which is the RFP process. And we hope that we have some successful projects. We will, and people are using the token, selling, trading, etc., that we will start to have a better valuation on what a token is. But it's not guaranteed that we will get that, but that's one of the reasons we're doing this as a pilot program. We will be evaluating as we go along to try and calculate a better valuation on what a token actually is worth.
So with the number of unknowns we have at this point, we decided not to get too far ahead on this is exactly how it's going to be mapped out over the next 10 years and really approach this as a pilot. Our anticipation is that once this pilot plays out and those deals have been made and we've moved forward, we would bring a conversation back to council on reporting out on what happened and seeing if there's interest in continuing, and at that point having a conversation on what that would look like, whether that's every July we issue X number of tokens or something else.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Pallavi. Councilmember Zabriskie, questions?
Thank you, Lynn. First of all, I submitted written questions and the answers were both direct and comprehensive, so I appreciate that greatly. But now I have a new question prompted by one of your slides. Are you able to tell me what we mean by saying that the 30% rental rate is based on the AMI, then I lost it, but it's adjusted for bedroom size. Can you tell me how that
It's a standard calculation. We've used it, and I've never actually done the calculation, but it is a standard calculation. So it's based on the 150% AMI. I think the calculation is usually the household is number of bedrooms plus one. And so if it is a, you know, three bedroom apartment, the thought is it will likely have a household of 4. They'll take the 150 or 120% AMI for that household of 4 for the 3-bedroom unit and do 30% of that. So that is how it's calculated.
Okay, it's the correlation between the number of bedrooms, and from that you extrapolate or look for what the corresponding number of household members is.
Yes.
And then you have the AMI number. Yeah. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Glubstad.
I do not have any additional questions. Thank you.
I have one question. Also wanted to commend you, Lynn. I liked that you picked snow photos for all the houses. I appreciated that. Very weather appropriate. You mentioned that if somebody defaults on the deed restriction, that the owner would be banned from being part of the program and having an STR. What if this is, I guess, just curious how property management companies fit into this, and if they're the ones that are applying for the tokens and they're kind of running the deed restriction, how could they be punished potentially, even if they're not an owner of the house, or would they be? I guess, I don't know if this has been contemplated.
I think there's 2 different roles a property management company could play. One is for the workforce housing unit, and the other is for the short-term rentals. So the default that we're talking about is the default on the workforce housing unit. So for example, Mayor Romack, if you deed restricted a home for workforce housing and then you ended up using it for some other use, that would be an example of a default. So in that case, any short-term, you would be banned from participating in short-term rental or token program for 5 years. I suppose if the workforce housing unit, or if the workforce housing unit were managed by a property management company, we would hold the owner of that property responsible for the default.
And you know, it wouldn't take long before, if a property management company fumbled it, for that to get around, and it would ultimately hurt their business, even though we would sort of penalize the owner rather than the management company. They would get what was coming to them.
Is that a legal term?
Yes, we just go for that.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that. Just something for us to be aware of if, you know, people aren't managing things the way they should be. All right, that's all the questions I had. We'll open it up to public comment. Seeing none, we will close public comment and bring it back up here. Vice Mayor Pallavi, comments, deliberation.
Yeah, no additional comments. Like I said, I've been at the table from day one on this thing. I hold out a huge amount of hope that it gets utilized. I am not going to be shocked if people look at us like we're crazy as well. But we've spent a lot of time on this to get to this point. I applaud you, Lynn, Hillary, everybody else. And the STR department as well, who kind of got us to this program. And we will see what the future holds, and we'll see if we can continue to make a dent in this. So yeah, I'm supportive. I don't need to make any changes. I think it's a pretty open box at this point, and we got to see what works. So that's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Zabriskie.
I think the staff's done a commendable job on putting this together, and that it's I have more confidence in it now than I did before. I feel like we're creating certain expectations in adopting this program, and I don't want to think of it. I think maybe Vice Mayor Pallavi was trying to think how, using some colorful language to talk about us acting at our whim. I don't think he really means we're going to act at our whim. We're creating expectations for the people who are going to make the effort to apply and seek to participate. I see us, we will be acting in good faith to respond to those requests and do what we can to comply with the reasonable expectations we've created. Rather than acting whimsically.
Thank you. Councilmember Glowstep?
Thank you. I have previously stated my concerns with monetizing our short-term rentals, so I'm just gonna re-invoke that. I've been there, we don't have to cover it again. I think though, staff has done a tremendous job putting really appropriate bumpers on this program, so I commend you for that. Again, as I stated before, it's a very creative solution. I'm much more comfortable with it now with those bumpers and guidelines, so thank you for helping me get there. I think Councilmember Pallavi makes an excellent point though, that I think what you were referring to in terms of whims is really more things could change on it with the future council. And so that's not something that we need to address now, but something that we really should contemplate, particularly if we are so fortunate to actually award some of these tokens and get some of these deed restrictions. We really should consider what that might look like long term. So that's for a future discussion. My only thing that I want to deliberate with my fellow council members on is the ability to transfer a token 3 times per year. I'm uncomfortable with that. That means this token could grace 4 different properties in a year. If you start with one and you can transfer it 3 times. So I'm just uncomfortable with that. I feel like that particularly if these are awarded to a property manager, they could really kind of surf these depending upon a few different impacts or possible leveraging of optimal housing and optimal profit. I would be very comfortable with a single transfer per year if one property they decide to take off the short-term rental market and they want to move it to a different one. But I'm pretty uncomfortable with being able to be utilized at 4 different properties in 1 year. So I'd like to hear my fellow council members' thoughts on that.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I was gonna ask staff a quick question because I'm not sure I hear what you're saying for sure. What I'm wondering is if a token gets transferred and that next person in line goes and pulls an annual STR permit, then it's locked in, I'm assuming. I mean, they would have to.
Misunderstanding that.
I think so.
One of the values of the token compared to a certificate is that you can make the transfer. That it is, and 3 was, we talked to the short-term rental division, and 3 worked for them administratively. That's why we capped it at 3. But yes, it can transfer. It's not for a full year. So that is one benefit of the token over sitting on the wait list and getting a regular certificate.
But so I guess just to clarify though, if you pull, so in order for it to transfer a second time, does the property that it was originally transferred to, which then gets an STR certificate, that STR certificate has a duration of a calendar year. So basically, if it transfers a second time or a third time, are we saying that the original property, they're now off?
Yes, that property no longer the initial property no longer has a short-term rental certificate and is not able to be short-term rented.
Right. So to me, it's more of like you put it on one property because you're a property manager, let's say, and you're like, okay, person A, and then person A 2 months later decides to sell their house, right, or something like that, and so that token now doesn't hold that value that it once did, and so it could go to the next one. I mean, that's how I was understanding it.
It holds the same value. That property manager or the developer or whoever holds that token can then transfer it to another property, sell it, right? So it, again, I keep considering the monetization of this, and And I'm particularly concerned about that continual transfer of that token to 4 different properties in 1 year. And it sounds like that is what they could theoretically do, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm uncomfortable with that.
But each time that the original token holder is losing their STR certificate, we're not creating, one token is not creating 4 new short-term rentals. It's still creating only 1 short-term rental.
Right.
Right. So I
Councilmember
guess
Klofstad's more concerned of just the movement and how this would affect the value, right? You're not concerned it's not adding any STRs.
I understand it's not
Yeah.
having any STRs.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about that ability to, particularly for a property manager, to optimize that based on season or property, or, they have it on one property that's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and then they get a new property that's a 5-bedroom and they want to move it to that, and then they get a 6-bedroom and they want to move it to
I understand
that.
what you're saying. Okay, so what you're concerned with is, so somebody might transfer a token or a short-term rental and then pull it
Yeah.
and say,
move it to a
I'm now
different
gonna
property.
pull it. And so you, property owner A, had a short-term rental certificate, but now we're pulling your short-term rental certificate? I agree with you, that is troubling. Doesn't the token go with the certificate, or is the token stay
It
with?
goes with the person who submits the RFP to us. It's up to them. And that's what I mean.
Okay, so that's the discrepancy then, in my opinion, because the token needs to be with the actual STR certificate, and those need to be tied together.
I don't think that's the way this is written.
So the token is with the STR certificate. The token is basically traded for a certificate. I think about like the token is traded for a certificate. If they want to transfer to a different property, they cancel the certificate, it turns back into a token, then the token is traded for a certificate for a different property. So the token and the certificate don't really exist at the same time.
So I do have a problem with that.
Thank you. I'm glad.
I 100% agree with you then.
Let's go to Councilmember Zabriskie.
I need to have staff refresh my recollection. Do we give out short-term certificates ranked according to the nature of the rental? Number of bedrooms it has, the value it has?
No.
Okay. And in this program, we're not asking the applicants to describe to us the nature of the property that's going to be short-term rented.
No.
For purposes of our deliberations, I don't understand what the concern is, why monetizing the token is bad policy. Essentially, potentially increasing the value of the token to the applicant because it can be transferred 3 times in a year. What's bad about monetizing it?
I'm not sure that's what we're referring to. I think the monetization is happening regardless, and that was Anna's point, Councilmember Klostef's point. I think what the concern is, and this is my concern, and we're probably coming at it from different places, but my concern is, you take a token, that token goes to a property, that property gets a short-term rental permit, they're taking reservations potentially. I mean, they need to have certainty to operate a short-term rental. So the token holder, if they are different from the STR operator, I mean, that to me seems like we are putting the STR operator at the whim of the token holder.
And
right?
Yes. And in addition to that, since these tokens can be sold, I am concerned about that 3-time transfer then just becoming a marketplace for selling these things to a higher bidder or a higher price.
I would recommend there's 0. I mean, you transfer it once, you assign it once in a calendar year, and that's it.
I'm going to pop in with my thoughts, because I think at first Councilmember Clove said I was thinking along the lines, but then now thinking about it in terms of a property manager and how you have a property on Ski Slope Way that's a great summer rental, but then you don't want to rent it out in the winter because of snow concerns, but you have a rental in Prosser that would be better, so you can use your token on the Tahoe Downer house in the summer, and then you say, I'm gonna transfer it now to this other property to utilize.
And I think that would be perfectly appropriate, and that's one transfer a year.
Right. So I guess maybe I'd fall in line of, I think, 1 or 2 transfers. I guess I'm less concerned from if it's a property manager, it seems like that could be beneficial to be able to move things around a little bit like that. But you guys have concern.
But that's not our only use case. Our property manager is by far not the only use case, and that's what concerns me. So let's say a developer chooses to use this, who builds a bunch of new units, right, and is using our THAT program, is trying to cobble together any funding sources they can. They've now tapped into this, they've provided a value, they've created a market. I don't know, to me it seems like we're messing with the market too much by having too many transfer options, and that the market then is a lot more stable if you only allow it to be transferred once. Like,
I agree.
Yeah.
And I appreciate staff's willingness to maximize their capacity on these transfers.
yeah.
But I also think it would be beneficial and more stabilizing for our SDR market and staff to reduce the number of transfers. I agree, we need that, allowing one makes sense. We have very different needs for summer homes versus winter homes, in particularly in the short-term rental market. So I'd be very comfortable with that. That's where I stand with it.
And sorry, I'll back you up on that. I'm comfortable with 1, and I agree. That seems to be more than sufficient to start with.
Councilmember Zabriskie?
I believe staff said they had spoken with the people in the business and the ones who stand to profit from this and who would be participating in the program. And what I understand their position to be is that 3 transfers a year is going to make this participation in this program more attractive to them. And I don't feel sitting up here that we have the same expertise they do, and I don't see a downside for the community at large in allowing the 3 transfers per year. What I'm hearing is we're substituting our business judgment for that of the businesses that would actually participate in it. And so I would stick with staff's recommendation rather than presuming to know better than the businesses.
Council members of the state, if I could provide a clarification. I don't believe that we specifically spoke with the businesses about the number of transfers per year. The feedback we got was certainly that the ability to transfer adds value and enticement to this program. The capping it at 3 transfers per year was based on conversation with our short-term rental staff on sort of administrative capacity and wanting to have some sideboards so that it didn't transfer every week, which would be administratively infeasible.
Okay, so the business participants, we're saying that the more we can transfer it, the more attractive it is. Is that what they were saying?
In general, yes, the ability to transfer makes it more attractive.
They also said they'd like it to be cross-jurisdictional, but we didn't take that piece of advice. So there was a lot that came from the business interest that staff said, yeah, that's great, thanks, but we're gonna go in a different direction.
Yeah,
You know,
I can
this was the opposite.
understand. We have policy reasons for keeping it within our jurisdiction. What I'm not hearing is that same sort of policy reason for saying we're gonna limit the number of transfers to a lower number.
Councilmember Zabriskie, would you be comfortable with 2 or lowering it all, or you just feel like we should go with staff's recommendation because that's what they put forward?
I think 2 is a better number than 1.
And on this side, you guys feel pretty strong on the 1 side and not 2?
I do. I feel pretty strong on that. It's,
Can you elaborate a little bit more then? Is there anything more you can say on why you're ready to, or
I think, I don't know, I feel like we have, what else would you want to add to
I
that?
mean, I would add, to me, it's a business continuity type of thing. Like, to me, it's certainty. I mean, I think from a property,
For the short-term rental.
yeah, for the short-term renter. I mean, for a property manager, we don't know if they're even being clear with their client and saying, hey, by the way, I'm going to give you a permit right now. That might be all they ever say, right? We aren't controlling the disclosure on this. There's no contractual really anything. So to me, this is almost like a consumer protection thing is how I look at it. Like, basically, we're providing certainty for, let's use that property manager example. Property manager has a new dwelling unit that potentially comes into their inventory, but they don't have a short-term rental permit. Okay, great. I'm gonna go get you a short-term rental permit, person A. Great. Now I got that permit, and I'm not gonna tell you anything. I got your permit. Sign up with me. Huh, okay, 6 months go by, and your property's not generating enough to be in my inventory. I'm gonna take said permit and move it to this other house now. To me, that puts in a normal situation, a property manager is gonna have a contract with that property owner, right, as to what that looks like. I think that we're creating an opportunity here for sleight of hand, for dishonesty. I see a potential for abuse, to be quite honest, and I see a potential that creates, if your house, and let's just go on the private market, let's say it's a private developer or somebody else, not even a property manager who has inventory. Property manager goes to Councilmember Klostad and says, hey, I'm gonna get you a short-term rental permit, but I hold the token. 6 months down the road, the same thing happens. You've turned your house into a short-term rental, right? And all of a sudden I'm like, sorry, your house didn't do what I want. I can go get another 10 grand to do something else with because I can now transfer this. I can transfer the certificate I gave you 6 months ago, and I can now transfer that over here.
Or 3 months ago.
Or 3 months ago, or 9 months ago, or whatever.
Let me give you maybe a more current example of a situation that we're experiencing right now that I want to avoid, right? The Planning Commission just changed the temporary use permit conditions. We are getting pleas now for the fact that people booked their weddings and now they can't have their wedding or the conditions have changed. I'm concerned about that. We are setting up a situation where we could be creating that on a regular basis.
I'm gonna jump in and say, I think I know how this side feels. I don't know if you're feeling any different. There's a lot of unknowns about this program, so it would be I'm happy to go along with this side and say, let's start at 1 and see where that takes us. Jen or Hillary, did you want to jump in?
Sure, we could always ask them if they need more.
Well, I think maybe Hillary and Nikki have come up with maybe a compromise.
Yeah, which may help address some of the concern. We could require the homeowner, the certificate holder's approval before the token is transferred. So if the token was not owned by the same person as their certificate holder, it would require concurrence of those two.
I think a part of the 3 transfer piece is maybe there's a homeowner that this is the way they're trying to get into the second home market or the retirement home, and they do want to rent it out for 3 months of the year or 6 months of the year, but they don't want to rent it out the whole year. So the property manager could take it for that property, apply it, and then move it to another property. And maybe there's another property that's only 3 months a year, and it's kind of this moving target. If the concern is consumer protection, that the sign off by the property owner might cover that. You're still monetizing it, so that's still an issue.
Would that alleviate concerns?
I don't think it's necessary I'm fine. I think if we have consensus on one, I'm perfectly happy to start with one. If somebody comes back to us in 3 years and is like, man, I really could have, moved that thing around 3 or 4 times. I mean, we can kind of think about it then when we're revising this thing, but I don't know, like.
I agree, because I mean, that sounds great, but then there's also the option for them to sell these.
Yeah.
And so that, I don't know, I would prefer starting with one. If we need, again, we're willing to pivot and modify if we get the feedback from the people that are interested in responding to this, that's not gonna work for them, then please let us know.
Councilmember Zabriskie, last thoughts, and then I feel like we should progress.
Yeah. Still, what I've heard is the people who would participate in the program say it would be better if these were freely transferable, and the staff said for administrative reasons we're going to cap it at 3 per year. On the example of a property manager holding the permit, the token, and then yanking it, well, the property manager enters into a contract with the homeowner. And it's going to be in the contract how long that property can be short-term rented, and the homeowner protects himself, or at least knows whether it's going to be able to short-term rent for 3 months, 6 months, or a year, based on the contract with the property management company. So it's not a case of the property management company being able to unilaterally yank the token, or if it does so, it's in breach of contract. So I think the program is more likely to succeed if we do the 3 transfers. Alternatively, I like the compromise offered by staff.
This side is feeling, one, move ahead with the program as outlined with the stipulation that it's only 1 transfer per year? Okay, do we need a motion? Approve the short-term rental, or is that direction enough?
I think we were making a motion.
Okay,
I think because you don't have consensus, a motion would be better for the record.
I'll make a motion that we approve the short-term rental workforce housing token pilot program guidelines and requests for proposals with the amendment that a token can transfer once within a calendar year. In addition, I don't think you need to direct staff, but we are authorizing the town manager to make minor administrative changes to the guidelines if necessary as well. So there you go.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes 3-1. Thank you very much, staff and council members, for a good discussion. Look forward to seeing responses to that RFP. All right, moving to our next presentation, Donner Lake Litter Art Concept Review and Approval, and we have Becky to present to us.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I have to say I'm happy to be here tonight to talk about something that's sort of fun and not DMT or local road safety plans and things like that. I mean, those are important too, but this is different. So today we're talking about the Donner Lake Litter Art Concept Project. Just a little background, back in July of 2022, the town council directed staff to pursue a design and fabrication of a piece of art that was made out of litter that was pulled from Donner Lake. And this idea was actually originally proposed by Clean Up the Lake, Colin West. It was his kind of idea. They're doing something similar down the South Shore, where they're taking litter that was pulled from Lake Tahoe to create a sculpture to be placed down the South Shore. And this picture here that you see is Ethel the whale. It's an 82-foot whale, life-size whale made of 5,000 pounds of trash by the same artist that we're working with for Donner Lake. So the selected artists are Joel Dean Stockdale and Justina Salnikova. They're represented by Billing 180. In August 2022, we went to the Public Art Commission of Truckee and we presented this idea to them. We said, do you all want to brainstorm some concepts for the artist to use to develop, and do you have some ideas for locations? And although we did do some brainstorming for locations, the artist at that time said, no, we think we should let the artist sort of decide what concepts. And so we've sort of worked with the artist since then. We entered into a contract with them in January, and they developed quite a few concepts, and we worked with them to narrow it down to 3. This picture just shows some of the material they pulled out of Donner Lake that they're working with, and this is important. I won't spend a lot of time on this, just kind of important to think about because it does impact the colors and the texture of the art that they create. This is a picture of the artists. They have, as I mentioned, they did Ethel the Whale. They're working on something down South Shore. They have a fair amount of experience doing stuff with trash and working and creating animals. And they have, I think, one thing that I took away from the Art Commission when we last presented to them is that they were impressed with the amount of experience they had, so really excited to work with them. These are just pictures that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but these are just examples of their work. I thought it was worth throwing in here. Go back, right? So the location that has been chosen is the Donner Lake Boat Launching Facility. And this is a picture of one of the planners there. And if you haven't noticed, we have a representative here from Parks and Rec. If you have any questions about that. But we would talk to them a little bit about this project, and they've been great partners. And Colin West went before their board a couple months ago, and through that process, they said they were supportive of this site, which is great, and also helped fund some of the storage of the litter for the clean up the lake, as well as offered to help pour some of the foundations for the ultimate location of the art. So what we're talking about is putting the art in 1 or 2 of the planters that are out here on this facility, which it's a good location. People are walking out there. You can see the lake in the background, and I think it's a good choice. So these are the 3 concepts that the artist came up with. As I mentioned before, they came up with a number, but we kind of narrowed it down to these 3 to sort of take through the process. So it's the coyote, the jumping fish, and the footprints. I'm going to go through each one. This is part of the information that they gave us as part of their proposal. And I'm going to just read this because I'm sure if I tried to paraphrase, I would mess it up. So 2 feet made of litter are stepping into planters, leaving imprints on the earth. The ecological footprint is an increasingly popular term and metric when discussing how our resource use impacts and how our resource use impacts the planet coined by the Global Footprint Network. This sculpture plays off that term and depicts 2 large human feet in motion that are made of waste. The scale helps show the enormity of the problem, while the familiar foot form brings it back to the humanity's responsibility. Feet are what connects each of us to the earth and grounds us to the harmonics and frequencies of the planet. They also remind us of the generations of humans that were here before all the generations to come. And so the idea is, on this one, it would be 2 different sculptures, one in each of 2 planters, 2 different footprints, sort of like shown in this graphic. The second concept was the jumping fish. 2 native fish made entirely out of waste jump out of the planter, making it look like they're jumping straight out of the lake at certain angles. They're reminding humans what will happen if we don't repair the damage already done and make a plan to continue to care for the ecosystem in and around the lake. If this option is chosen, they have actually offered to work with the Watershed Council to make sure that they choose the appropriate species. One of the things that I heard from the artists more recently is I think when we're talking about specific species, that will be more in the plaque and the write-up of the art, but I think they want to be a little more abstract with the fish themselves, so we might not try to mimic an exact species. So this is just, again, this is 2 sculptures, 1 in each of the planters. And then the third is the coyote. And so coyote sits on the shore, a scavenger made of scavenged materials. The ancestral dog is interacting with a ball made of lost balls ready to fetch. They look slightly back, challenging you to be as adaptable as they are. Coyotes help maintain rodent populations in the wild and often in urban neighborhood and are very crucial ecosystem. The concept here is to just do one, is to be a larger larger sculpture. The 2 fish and the 2 feet were proposed to be like about 5 feet, and this would be taller. This would be about twice as big. So we took these concepts through a couple, some outreach. The first thing we did was we went to the Public Art Commission of Truckee and February 7th and kind of got their feedback. The majority of the pact favored the jumping fish concept. One commissioner favored the coyote and one favored the footprints. We also, after that meeting, Braun helped sort of get these concepts out to the community. We did an Instagram poll. We had people provide comments on Facebook and Instagram and did a website survey, and we got almost 1,500 votes, which I think is pretty good. And the majority of the people that responded liked the jumping fish concept, followed by the coyote and the footprints. Some of the feedback that we got was that some people didn't like the footprints. They felt they were out of place or bad taste or unattractive. But they also, a number liked it, but thought it required too much explanation of what that all meant. So many people felt that the jumping fish were appropriate for Donner Lake, and there was a clear connection to Donner Lake. So there was mixed opinions about the coyote. We did have some people throw in some other ideas. We of course had 10 people suggesting a bear sculpture, and there was a bunch of other individual votes for different types of animals out there. On February 23rd, we took this information to the Truckee Donner Recreation and Park District Board meeting and let them know that jumping fish was sort of the concept that was getting the most votes. In general, and if you had questions, some might be able to help us out with elaborating, but they indicate support for the project and the jumping fish concept and the proposed locations. One of the suggestions of the board members was to work with the representatives from the Washoe tribe to not only provide kind of input through the design process, but potentially for the interpretation. So we're kind of working through how we might do that, and we've talked to the artists, and they're 100% on board with that idea. And as I mentioned before, the artists, they proposed to work with the Watershed Council to make sure that whatever interpretations on the plaque is appropriate and is identifying the appropriate fish. And that we're focusing on native species and ones that potentially are still in the lake and we can still save, I think was the idea. Moving forward, because we don't own the property that these planters are on, the Parks and Rec District will be entering into an agreement. Some of the things we'll have to figure out is long-term maintenance and ownership of the sculptures. But that is something per our staff recommendation. We're hoping tonight that you will provide direction to give town manager the ability to kind of work through those details with the Park and Rec. I think I sort of missed the most important point here is that because we've got so many people voting for the jumping fish, that is our recommendation to move forward with those. I'm not sure I actually clearly said that yet. So moving on to fiscal impact, we have a CIP budget that is for public art master plan implementation. There is money in that budget. We've already kind of entered into a contract to do the fabrication and installation of this sculpture. We just want to reiterate that there is funding in there, and of course with the generous contributions from Park and Rec for cleaning up the lakes costs, and as well as allowing us to use the planters and helping with the foundation. So our recommendation tonight is to direct staff to pursue the final design and fabrication of the jumping fish concept with Building 180, and then authorize the town manager to execute a contract with Truckee Donner Rec and Park District to identify ownership and maintenance responsibilities of the installed art. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Becky. We will start with council questions. Councilmember Zabriskie.
Who recommended the sculpin?
We had The artist had originally suggested that, and we've kind of gone back and forth on a few different species. But yeah, that was originally there. You're gonna get me confused here because I forget which is which. But they had originally proposed 2 species, and from the conversations that we had with the Watershed Council, they thought, well, we're not sure that they're actually, the whitefish and the sculpin were in the lake, so they had suggested a couple others to highlight instead. So I think the sculpin is the one that's not necessarily, is that right? Are they in the lake? They are in the lake. Okay, you check. Yeah, so I'm not sure.
Those are all my questions.
Okay.
And Councilmember Klugstad.
I do just have one question. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to give feedback on this, but it sounds like it's already kind of been decided. And that the artists are aware of, I guess, the material, like you pointed out, that we have available to them. Is part of this $80,000 contract also to provide, I'm assuming there's going to be some structural supports and fastening mechanisms and things like that. So that's going to pay for part of it, or are they planning on utilizing when they find the trash in order to do all of that?
There will be some additional, it'll be made entirely out of the stuff that's pulled out of our lake, except for some of the structural stuff, some of the internal structure will come from elsewhere. But the $50,000 contract plus the contributions from Park and Rec is the total cost. So that includes all that and the engineering for it.
Okay, and then lastly, are they just using what we've already pulled out? Because I understand Clean Up the Lake plans on doing another round in Donner Lake, or they're just going to use what they have right now?
They've already picked it up and they're got it on site. So
great, thank you.
Vice Mayor Pallavi?
Does Park and Rec maintain the 2 planters right now, or who maintains those 2 planters right now?
That's theirs that they need.
That's theirs. And are we anticipating any maintenance or other types of issues moving forward? What was the feedback you got from Park and Rec board and staff in terms of, maintaining? I think we would want to celebrate the art as well, and we don't necessarily want a bunch of bushes, kind of overgrowing them. So just sort of, how are we going to either prioritize that maintenance, or what does that look like and down the road?
I think that we haven't gone through all those details, but I think sort of in the informal discussions that we've had, the sculptures would really be highlighted and not so much the landscaping anymore. So that's sort of the intent there. In terms of the maintenance of the sculptures themselves, one of the things that we'll be getting from the artist is a maintenance manual, and hopefully it will, there's a certain amount of a warranty that hopefully it won't require a lot of maintenance, at least in the shorter term. So.
Will they be lighted? Is there power there?
That is not part of their proposal. So that's something that we could figure out as we get down the process.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
And Councilmember Henderson, welcome. We're glad to have you here. Did you have any questions on item 7.2?
Thank you, and I apologize for being late this evening. I guess my only question was related to sort of the longer term maintenance. And Becky, I heard you just say, in the short term, how are we defining that? Do we have any sense of, like, if we get past 5 years, or like what might that look like in terms of fiscal responsibility, or is that an unknown at this point?
So the agreement that we have right now, I believe there's sort of a 1-year warranty on the art itself, but then it's supposed to be durable. If something happens that causes an issue that we can't repair, we do have the ability to remove it or give the artist an opportunity to fix it. But I guess in terms of guarantees on how, one thing I'll say is it should be protected in the winter, but this isn't necessarily getting used with snow removal operations nearby. We have the ability to try to fix it, and if we can't, our agreement doesn't allow us to take it out or put it somewhere else, so we just have to notify the artist.
Okay, thank you, that's it for me.
Thank you. I do not have any further questions. Thank you for your presentation. So with that, we will open it up for public comment. Yes, thought we might have one on this one. If you want to come on up to the podium, yep, and if you don't mind saying your name, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Of course. Are we good? Great. Good evening, Mayor Romack and board members, council members. My name is Sven Leff. I'm representing the Rec and Park District, the general manager. First of all, for about, I've had 5 or 6 months now. I've been, engaged with this project with Becky and with the town, and we're very excited about it. I first want to recognize that art matters, and it's really kind of a cool project from our perspective at the Recreation and Park District. I second want to recognize that it's quite a significant investment and commitment by the town to commission art for $50,000. I think that's very generous. Quite frankly, it shows the support for art and its beautification. It's an interesting project because Clean Up the Lake, I don't know how they came to us, in fact, they're just passionate about what they do, right? Eco systems and stuff, and they just accessed the lake for their dives through our boat launch. And then they came to you guys and Public Art Committee of Truckee, and that's all great. I mean, it's really pretty cool. So this comes to fruition, first of all, with respect to the maintenance and trying to represent what our side of what Becky had said is we hope the sculpture is also built with the durability, 20, 25 years time. Then we know the artists prefer that as well. And they have even said if there's some damage, they would love an opportunity to repair that. So whether after installation, the terms of the agreement is that the maintenance is on the town or the maintenance is now in Recreation Park District, we want to keep involved with the Public Art Committee who has commissioned work as well as the artists to get it repaired. And our commitment, I don't even like the planters and the overgrown bushes. I want to get it cleaned up when we get to the new year. And if this artwork is elevated a couple of feet above grade on that planter, there's room for some flowers or some other neat native plantings to really spruce it up. At about 5 feet tall on top of the planters, these fish are going to be visible from the driver's by. That's going to be really interesting, not just the people who go out there to take pictures. So there's a lot of really neat things with this fish concept. That was the overwhelming majority of preference by our board and staff as well as the public, so that part's pretty cool. One of the other things I wanted to suggest, in my previous agency, we did a park renovation and the sculpture was, I was with the city and the sculpture was provided by the county. And when I was back there recently, I saw it and it was really neat to see that the plaque had been designed that said a gift from the county of Lynn. And I could easily see it's totally appropriate that a plaque was also installed, a gift from the town of Truckee with the logo or something else like that to totally recognize the investment and the contribution that the town of Truckee has made. So I do suggest that that be included in some aspects of the plans. With respect to going forward, yes, we've got some ideas, Becky and I and a couple others, about sort of a ownership transfer kind of an arrangement that's going to come up. I think that's part of the discussion they're interested in hearing from you tonight as to guidelines going forward. It's easy to, hey, we've constructed it, we've installed it, the town's going to wash our hands of the maintenance. That's perfectly appropriate. Or the town may want to stay committed to it for 5 years, or the town may want to stay committed to owning this thing, forever. It's entirely up to you. I find it to be cleanest to be like, hey, we've done it, we've made our commitment. Now town or Rec and Park District, you guys uphold your commitment to maintain this thing, and I think that's a good starting point to take back to my organization and do. So I guess I got 20 seconds. Didn't know. I feel like I'm talking forever. I don't have much more to add, but I am here for questions. And again, I just want to appreciate or express our appreciation for this project and this potential gift to Donner Lake Boat Launch. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sven, and thanks for the support from your board as well. Time's up. All right, any other public comment?
So much.
Seeing none, we will close public comment and we will bring it back up here. Councilmember Zabriskie, we started on this side.
Sorry.
Time's up. Next person. Just kidding. Just kidding, Councilmember Zabriskie.
Looks good to me. Any time left?
That's it? All right, good. Councilmember Klofstad.
I too, Sven, share your excitement and enthusiasm for this project. I think our community does too, based on the number of respondents that we had. I'll just say, ever since I first walked into the Monterey Bay Aquarium and saw their single-use plastics sculptures, I wanted something like this for our community. And then when Clean Up the Lake started pulling so much stuff out of there, Colin and I actually talked about that. And so that was one of the genesis of this idea. So I'm thrilled. I would just caution that I understand the artists want to be have a little bit of artistic freedom, but I do want to caution that we don't want to have another circumstance where we have non-native species and we have another roundabout with non-native flowers in it, right? So that would be my only caution to this. Other than, please make sure they understand our snow load. Perhaps maybe a quick drive out there after this next storm, take a photo, send it to them, make sure they understand what happens out there. Yeah. So I'm very excited. Let's go forth.
Vice Mayor Poppy.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up too, because I like the coyote. But actually thought about that wind shear a few days ago. I was like, I don't know, that coyote might fit so well. The fish are a lot more aerodynamic. So yeah, no, I think we're all good. I'm in agreement with what's been stated. Thanks to Sven and your board and your organization for stepping up and assisting us with this great project, letting us put it on in your facilities, whatever, both. Yeah, and I think it's a great step in the right direction, and I'm not gonna be the one to go against our Public Art Commission or our Instagram community. So I'm right in line and on board, so there you go.
Yeah, I had something.
You can, Councilmember Zabriskie.
Yeah, I was a little flip myself just then. Councilmember Klofstad reminded me, I would certainly like to see these fish be as true to their actual anatomy as possible. I mean, the sculpin is an exciting enough fish in terms of its adaptive form. I wouldn't want to see it abstracted any more than artistic license would narrowly allow.
Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you. I'm excited to see the community support behind this, and again, how much feedback we did have on it. Overwhelming support for this particular concept. I think it's a wonderful partnership between the town and the rec district, and really appreciate Sven you being here tonight and your board supporting this as well. And I think this, in combination with some of the other initiatives that we have happening right now around exploring plastic bottle ban and our ban on styrofoam. I think that these things really complement one another, and I'm really excited to support this.
Thank you very much. I will echo what many of my fellow council members said. Thank you, Sven, and again your board for being partners in this and allowing the sculpture to be on your facility. This is going to be a beautiful place for that. As for artistic license and being true, I'm okay giving them a little leeway, colors and things like that. I could see them wanting to diverge a bit, so I don't want us to be too stringent and it needs to be exactly a native species, just because I'm sure they're going to make something that looks really neat. And if we have a plaque, as you kind of mentioned, Becky, that says something about the fish in the lake, that could describe a little bit of how it's different. So that would be my only comment. All right, so with that, do we have a motion? Do we need a motion on this one, or are we good? We gave you enough direction?
Let's just do a motion.
All right, we like motions. Who would like to make this one? Councilmember Klofstad.
Sure, is it? I move that we direct staff to pursue the final design and fabrication of the jumping fish at Donner Lake Art Concept with Building 180 and authorize the town manager to execute a contract with TDRPD to identify ownership and maintenance responsibilities for installed art.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Becky. All right, moving right along. Since we have one discussion item left, I say we continue on. 7.3, use of Truckee Home Access Program, THAP, to fund a multi-family workforce housing acquisition. And looks like we have Hillary to present.
Okay. Just going to the bathroom.
Okay.
Since we don't take breaks anymore. Hold up.
Sorry, Dave. Go ahead, Hillary.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm excited about this next item, which is a recommendation to Council to authorize the use of the Truckee Home Access Program, or THAP, since we love our acronyms, to fund the acquisition of an 8-unit workforce housing complex by the Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency. And we have Emily Vitus, the Executive Director of the Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency with us tonight. So I'll provide a brief overview and then turn over to Emily for some comments as well. As a reminder to our listening public, the Truckee Home Access Program is a town program through which the town purchases deed restrictions on housing units to ensure long-term preservation of housing for use by our regional workforce. The 55-year deed restriction that's placed on these properties places legal requirements on how the property can be used, including requiring that the resident household meet local employment requirements, must be a full-time resident or residents, and it cannot, or the residents cannot exceed a household income cap placed on that property. The THAP program is intentionally structured to be flexible so that it can be used in a variety of different scenarios, including by home buyers, sellers, local businesses, and developers. Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency, as you will recall, is a joint powers authority that's comprised of 7 local public agencies, including the town. And while the Workforce Housing Agency's initial work focused on workforce housing solutions specifically for those 7 member agency employees, over the past year, the agency has completed a strategic planning process that expands the mission to work that more broadly encompasses the region's workforce. And they'll actually be providing an update on their strategic plan at our next council meeting. The agency has recently been approached with an opportunity to acquire and preserve an 8-unit complex that's currently used as workforce housing but is not preserved through a deed restriction. This acquisition would preserve these homes long-term as part of our local workforce inventory. So it's an exciting opportunity that doesn't come around very often. The Workforce Housing Agency is currently working with local partners to piece together a financing strategy and has discussed with town staff the concept of using the THAP program for these units. This would both provide some town funding to help support the acquisition and would also take advantage of the town's existing THAP deed restriction process and structure that we've developed in order to ensure long-term preservation of those units. While the specific details are still being worked out with the different partners, we don't have a specific dollar value and all of the details worked out to bring to council right now. So what we're recommending to council is to approve parameters that staff could then use to negotiate the final deal with the Workforce Housing Agency. So our recommended parameters is that the town would fund 16% of the purchase price for those units, and that's the standard THAP funding amount that we use, with a total town contribution not to exceed $400,000. One of the parameters we recommended also that this would not displace any of the current residents of that property, and that the deed restriction would follow the THAP occupant requirements However, the median income or income cap based on those units could be lower than the 245, excuse me, AMI that we have in the THAP program for some of those units. So that piece is still being worked out exactly how that would work. So with that, our recommendation is to approve the use of the workforce of the Truckee Home Access Program for this acquisition to support and deed restrict the 8 multifamily housing units by the Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency. So I went through that quickly. I'm happy to answer any questions, but first I want to turn it over to Emily to make some comments.
Can you hear me? Is it on? Okay. Good evening, Mayor Womack and members of the council. So just a quick overview on this opportunity and where we are right now. This is moving very, very quickly. It is currently an off-market opportunity, so we're trying to move as quickly as we can to piece together all of the funds to make an offer on this property. Part of this is coming before you and asking you all to contribute THAP dollars to help secure this property for long-term community use. So the property came to us in early 2023. It is a property owner that actually built the property. They've owned it since the 90s. And for the most part, it has been used for locals' use since they built that property in the 90s. They came to us because they're looking for somebody that is willing to secure this property and keep local tenants in the property. However, we have been informed that if we are not able to move forward with this opportunity, they are going to be listing it publicly on the market. And as many of us know, over the last few years, the majority of multifamily complexes that have gone to market have sold to outside investors. So we also know that there are 45 multifamily developments or complexes in the North Tahoe Truckee region. So it's not a huge pool that we're looking at here. So the opportunity came to us about 6 weeks ago. Over the last 6 weeks, we have been going to different public and private partners, trying to identify funds to potentially secure this complex, somewhere around $2 million for the 8-unit complex. Right now we have commitments from 5 public agencies and 1 private employer to help us secure this property. They have all committed to not displacing. It's not you. Is that still working? I'll just talk. Is it back? To not displacing the current residents. However, some of the dollars that are being committed would allow for, when units come available, some of the dollars are tied to employers actually having first right of refusal to allow their employees to access these units. That is not all of the dollars, but when you're trying to piece together an opportunity like this, everybody has a different need, whether it's deed restriction, AMI caps, access to units, etc. Let's see. I think that's it. I want to answer questions and then see what comes up and be able to answer that. But I do want to mention that, as Hillary mentioned, the strategic plan is allowing us to look outside of ourselves, to start to be the agency that serves the greater community, the North Tahoe Truckee workforce. And part of that is acquisition, development, regional programs. So on the acquisition side of things, really our goal is, can we start to secure community housing assets in the long term? So we are preserving housing for our local workforce and looking at whether it's the 30 or the 55 year, we are using these units and they're no longer going to outside investors, outside buyers, etc., securing them for our local members of our community to utilize.
Thank you very much, Emily. And Hillary, got it? All right. We'll start on this side. Councilmember Klopstad, any questions?
I do not have any questions.
Vice Mayor Pallaby.
Yes. As both Emily and probably staff knew, and I didn't ask my questions ahead of time, so I sincerely apologize for that. Hi, Emily. How are you? We're going to get a presentation on the new strategic plan at our next meeting, so this is a little bit out of order, and I don't know to what extent my fellow council members are up to speed with sort of what their direction is. But my question is, because I am up to speed with what your direction is, do you anticipate that this kind of funding request would, so I want to be very, very clear. I support the theory of using THAP's programmatic model for a deed restriction on this property. 100% on board. It's the dollars that I'm gonna obviously hone in on, which I'm sure you expected. Will the new iteration of this agency, primarily on the fundraising and financial side of things, is it anticipated that that will sort of replace the use of town funds if this kind of project came back before us in 3 years or 5 years, and there were funds in that bucket, for example?
Yeah, I think we're always going to be looking for public-private partnerships for all of the acquisitions, development, et cetera, that we are working on. While the new structure does include the creation of a 501c3 workforce housing fund that allows us to unlock public dollars in a more significant way, to leverage private dollars, whether it's private investment, philanthropy, et cetera. I think there's always going to be a potential that when you're trying to put a deal together, we're coming to our jurisdictional partners or other public agencies to make asks. I can't say that it's making asks of the Truckee Home Access Program, but I think we are all in this together, and we're always going to be looking to our entitlement agencies and jurisdictional partners to help us move these opportunities forward.
Yes, thank you.
Answer the
Excellent
question?
answer. So I guess what I'm getting at is, you said there's 5 public agencies and 1 private partner, and everybody has a different sort of like stake in the ground, right, of what they want, and that inherently bothers me.
Yes.
And we are the town doesn't have a stake in the ground, or at least we haven't spoken about that yet, right? This would be an opportunity to do so if we so desired. I'm not here to necessarily do that. I'm trying to really just understand how is the workforce housing agency, and I don't also want to blend all of these questions because it goes into my questions of how do we move through this in a way that doesn't allow an agency to put a stake in the ground and say, we want first right of refusal on X, or we haven't even gotten to this private partner conversation yet, right? Like, where'd that come from? And why did X private partner get picked over Y private partner? And where's the equity there? So I guess I'm going a little bit more towards the equity in the deal, and how it's really being crafted. Yeah.
Okay, so let me start over again. Yes, the 501c3, it's going, oh, it's back. Okay, so yes, the 501c3, when it is created, the intent there is you're actually unlocking dollars that don't have any of those types of restrictions. We are always going to be pursuing opportunities that we may have to go out to the community and start to layer on dollars to allow us to actually pursue something, right? So you have a $100 million development, there is a chance we're always going to need to go to the hospital district and say, can you contribute $1 million a year for 10 years, and in exchange your employees get 20 units. I don't think there's anything wrong with actually piecing together community funds to be able to allow us to unlock opportunities. However, the 501c3, the intention there is dollars are flowing into it, and they are working together to serve the entire community as a whole, without anybody having a certain stake in the ground. I would say, though, that the town stake in the ground is AMI restrictions and locals only use, right? And so every funder has something that we have to comply with to be able to unlock those dollars. The public versus private partnership, when we start looking at the 501c3, we're going to have to look at public-private partnerships. We've all seen how successful they can be. The private partner, the reason they've been brought in is because some of the employees in that complex are theirs, and we wanted them to have an opportunity to come in and contribute dollars to make sure that in perpetuity, or as long as this property is owned, that their employees have an opportunity to stay in those units. So this is a really unique one. It came to us before the 501c3 was created. We've been told that if it goes to market, it's going to sell to an investor, or it's going to be condoized. The rent doesn't really match what the market allows for given the value of the home. So we know that this potential property is lost to the community if it goes out to market.
Potentially.
Potentially. It's all potential.
All
right.
I think the rest of my comments are really more deliberation and commentary, so I appreciate your answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Henderson, we'll go to you next.
Thank you. I think just 1 or 2 questions. I know in the staff report it said at least 7 of the households would likely meet the regional workforce requirement, and I just want to confirm that if and when we get through the purchase of this property, that all 8 units, when they do turn over, would be subjected to the 55-year deed restriction that goes along with the THAP program and the workforce requirement. Is that correct?
Yeah, so 7 of the 8 tenants either work for a local employer or they are the business that is the local employer. And the 8th is an outside corporation. And so again, no displacement, but if and when that apartment turns over, it is going to be locals only use.
Thank you. And I guess my only other question is, because it sounds like we have other contributions that have already been at least verbally made, and we're looking for $400,000 from the town. Does that $400,000 then get us to the place that we need to be at, that purchase price, or are we still going to be lacking in funding?
Yep, up to $400,000, though based on the offer that we will be submitting in the next 48 hours, we're looking at a number below $400,000. But I do appreciate staff recognizing that there is a potential that the property sale, there's going to be negotiations there. But yes, the THAP dollars are worked into the calculation to get us to that offer amount. If the THAP dollars run unlocked, it is staff's responsibility to go out to public agencies, community partners, and look for additional dollars to try and make this work.
Okay, thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you. Councilmember Zabriskie.
Emily, did you say that some of the contributors to the funding would require certain units be allocated to them specifically?
Yep.
How many?
Yeah, so let's see, 4 of the units would be tied up by dollars that have first right of use access. That means that when a unit comes available, that entity has the first opportunity to rent the unit. If they don't have an employee that's available, it goes out to the open market. And so this isn't a unit that only stays within the purview of that funder. The dollars actually just allow them to have the first opportunity to rent that unit if and when it comes available. And then it opens up to the general workforce as long as they comply with the deed restriction, locals only, 245 area median income cap.
Okay. To make sure I understand, it's a one-time opportunity. It's for their first renter. They get one employee, and after that, whenever the employee leaves.
It's every time. Every time the unit comes available, that employer has the opportunity to place an employee. If they don't have an employee within the first, say, 21 days, that unit goes out to the general workforce, and we place a local that is compliant with the deed restriction.
And who's this favored funder?
The favored funder, the
Yes,
largest
the one
funder?
would get the benefit of the first opportunity.
The units will actually be tied to the individual partner agency. So one partner agency gets unit 1. Unit 1 partner agency gets unit 2 and 3. So it's just really when the units come available, a partner might be waiting 3, 5+ years to be able to get access to that unit, but they're contributing because 1, they see it as a community asset. They want to support the community and local workforce housing. 2, they see it as an opportunity for their employees to get into housing when that unit comes available.
And who are these participants? Who are the partners that would have this?
I'm not sure if I can disclose that right now because the offer has not been made public and we're still kind of trying to figure out dollars behind the scenes. I can tell you that all the public agencies are member agency partners of the Workforce Housing Agency.
Maybe we could just do a hypothetical and that could help you. So let's say town is going to contribute $500,000 and we tie that to we get first right of refusal on 2 units. And so we're basing a unit on at $250,000. Unit comes open, Emily would come to us and say, do you have an employee or within her connections, is there a town employee that meets the AMI restrictions that's in need of a home? If there isn't, it goes out to the market. It doesn't go to the other GPA agencies first. If we do, that employee goes in there. Let's say they stay for a year and then they leave, same thing happens. Is there another town employee that could go in there? Or if not, it goes out to the market. That's kind of that would be what, in this scenario, we would be asking for. We're not doing that, we're just asking for the deed restrictions, or at least that's staff's recommendation. But the member agencies that are putting in some amount of money are getting that right of first refusal. So there isn't really a preferred member, it's who's willing to put in dollars for it.
It'd be an entitled member. They'd have an entitlement. Thank you. And this is for staff. I was trying to compare the return on our investment compared with just the basic THAP program, where the experts have helped us determine that 16% of market value is where we think we should be able to find homeowners or buyers willing to deed restrict their property. And when I look at $50,000 a unit, which is what this would be, and I divide by 16%, do I come out at around 327,000, somewhere around in there?
Hillary's gonna run numbers, but it's valued the same as any other single-family home. It's all based on the purchase price at 16%. So we did building capacity because we don't know what the offer is going to be or where they would end up landing on that, but it wouldn't be more than the typical THAP program.
What I'm getting,
Yes, it's about 312,500 that would equate to $400,000, which is the maximum amount that staff recommended, and that would be with a sales price of 2.5 million, which is Emily stated is higher than what we anticipate the sales price would be.
okay, so I'm looking at this for, would it be, am I way off base to say this looks like in a sense, a good deal for the town? In the sense, deed restricting a property for only $50,000.
This is a cheaper deal than the majority of THAP deals. So our THAP program allows for a maximum sales price of $937,000 with a maximum deed restriction purchase price of $150,000. Here we are saying the maximum deed restriction purchase price would be $50,000, and we we're just about to close on our second THAP deal right now. The sales price for the deed restriction that we've been paying is it's about around 100,000.
Yeah, 106 was about 106 was the first one, and this one's just right around 90, so it's about 100 average.
I'll repeat that since Linda's on a microphone. The first THAP sales price we paid was 106,000 for the deed restriction, and we're about to close on one that's a little bit less than 100,000.
Okay, and thank you for the answers to the questions. Those were both direct and comprehensive, particularly where you compared the benefit of just a typical THAP transaction and this one, pointing out this is likely significantly more cost effective than constructing 8 new units, for example. And then you had 2 other reasons why staff's recommending this. Anyway, thank you for those answers.
You're welcome.
Those are all my questions.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yeah, do you mind if I ask one additional question?
Go for it.
So in the staff report, it says that the deed restrictions will follow the THAP occupant requirements, and that the units for the AMI level may be set lower than the 245% AMI specified in our THAP program guidelines. So who, how, and when is that decided?
Is it, if I take a, yeah, okay. Currently, the rents are like deeply below what they should be. Sitting around 80% that we don't know what the tenants or the household incomes are. All we can do is look at the rents currently. We don't have that information. But based on the quality of the property, the age of the property, the current tenants and what they're currently paying, we do not feel like we know that we would never bring these units up to market. And so when we've been looking at all of our 5-year financial forecasts and how do we make this work, we've been looking at bringing units over the course of many years, maybe closer to 120% from that like 60 to 80%. But we don't this property will not pencil as a 245 AMI property. If you look at the calculation of 245 as it relates to rent for one or two individuals in a unit, it just doesn't work, and we never want to be the agency that's actually bringing rents up that high for the types of individuals that are living in this complex currently.
Thanks so much, Emily.
Vice Mayor Pallavi, did you have another question?
I do. It keeps springing up. What you just said scares me. So where is the ongoing maintenance and coverage of overage going to come from? So you just told us that the property doesn't pencil.
Right.
Rents are not necessarily going to cover property taxes. They're not necessarily going to cover ongoing maintenance.
They're breaking even right now. So the property owner is currently breaking even. We are going to have to raise rents over the course of 5 years to even be able to make this property work.
So I guess the question is, more simply, is the Tahotaki Workforce Housing Agency will be the owner, right? So this will be the first property that this organization or entity is now the owner of. Is there a fiduciary responsibility under the Workforce Housing Agency's guidelines that requires
we make a certain
either that you make something or that there's use of certain funds to make sure that there's ample upkeep and reserves? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, so the financial model that we put together over the next 5 years brings us just up to a place that allows us to have enough of a fund that allows us to maintain the property appropriately. Additionally, we do have reserve funds that if we ever need to go to the board and say, we need a new roof and we need these dollars released, we're able to do so. We do not want to.
Where does that money come from?
The reserve fund?
What you just talked about, the deficit, is going to come from the reserve fund of TTWHA.
The Workforce Housing Agency we've already built. But however, the five-year financial model that we've built has us at the end of the year or each year having enough that allows us to have a maintenance fund that is specifically tied to this property. The dollars don't go anywhere else. The dollars live with the property for ongoing maintenance.
And will there be sort of a standalone budgetary, does this require its own fund under the charter of the Workforce Housing Agency? I'm getting very nervous about just sort of intermingling of funds, right?
Yes. It
So
will have
like
its own
roof
fund.
goes bad, using your example, roof goes bad in year 2.
Yep.
Now the Workforce Housing Agency is on the hook to repair the roof regardless of whatever monies are in the CAM fees or whatever other reserve fees for the actual property itself.
Right. So we already have in the financial model based on the existing rent rolls and bringing them up 5% over the first 2 years that will allow us funds that allow us up to a certain amount. Say we're thinking there may need to be a new roof placed on this property, for example. Those dollars would allow for that. However, if there is something that we did not foresee and the fund that is specific to this property cannot pay for it, we will have to go into, will the board consider the utilization of reserve funds that would then have to be paid back through this property over the course of however many years. So the policies will stand that the dollars stay separate from each other. However, this agency is going to have to, we own this asset. We will have to come up with the dollars to make this property something that really is stable and comfortable and safe for the tenants, even if it means having to pay that back over the course of however many years to ourselves. Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, I do not have any further questions. I think my fellow council members have done a good job with that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emily. With that, we will open up public comment. If there's anyone that would like to make a public comment. Seeing none, we will close public comment, bring it back to the dais, and Councilmember Klostad.
Well, I really appreciate all that questioning. That was very helpful. And making sure that we do have a long-term fiduciary responsibility there. It sounds like you do have it covered. This made perfect sense to me from the get-go based on the fact that it is probably the minimal dollar value for the maximum return. So I'm very supportive of this, and thank you very much, Emily and your team and staff for bringing this forward, this opportunity forward, another great creative housing solution for our community.
Vice Mayor Pallavi.
I'm really excited that this is a project and it's on the ground and it's real and we could potentially make a difference really quickly. So that's what got me really excited. I clearly have concerns over the fiduciary makeup of this entire deal. We'll see what happens. I'm more than willing to give it a chance because in all of our housing programs, we are exposed to risk. This is clearly a risky endeavor. It's amazing to get 5 public agencies to embark on such a risk. So I applaud you for doing that. I applaud the agencies for their leadership. And I hope that this can serve as an example, for us moving forward. And I also hope that we can replenish in our budget discussions this $400,000 should we so need it, and should the needs arise as we start to work with other developers and other programs and other things that are going to hopefully start to percolate to the surface once we see some of the risks that are being taken by those very jurisdictions. So really good job. Let's hope it goes through. Good luck. Yeah.
Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you. I'm supportive of this. I shared some of Councilmember Pallavi's concerns just around the financing and sort of commingling of funds. That said, we have a goal, and it's to deed restrict a lot of homes over the next 10 years. So a lot of our housing programs are pilots, they're new, they're innovative. This is another model for us to try and then evaluate how effective it is and what our return on investment truly is. So keep it short, I'm ready to support it.
Councilmember Zabriskie.
I agree with staff that this is a rare opportunity. It's much more cost effective than constructing 8 new units, and to me it's one of the most cost effective ways of providing the most housing we can for our workforce, to a part of our workforce that is most in need of housing. And just because there's a reserve fund and then a financing fund, I just see that as 2 separate funds, not as a commingling or a risk of commingling. So I don't see anything negative or suspect in that regard. I'm all in favor of this.
Thank you. I share in the excitement of my fellow council members for this opportunity. Appreciate staff and the Workforce Housing Agency for being nimble and jumping at opportunities, and I would encourage us all to continue to do this. This is what this program is kind of built for, I see, is how we can utilize different projects or developers or businesses, so really appreciate it. So with that, would anyone like to make a motion?
I move we approve the use of the Truckee Home Access Program to support the acquisition and deed restriction of 8 multifamily housing units by the Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously.
Can we clap?
Thank you, Emily and Hillary and everyone else for their hard work. All right, with that, we will move on to council reports. Vice Mayor Pallavi, you're first on my list here on this piece of paper. Would you like to go first?
Sure. Where are we? We are in February. I think, when was the last meeting? The 14th? Oh yeah, because we didn't do much stuff. Had a visit Truckee Tahoe board meeting. I don't think anything too crazy happened there. No. Sorry. Well, I do. I know what's happening. We are coming out with our Destination Stewardship Advisory Council, or some sort of version of that. There are approximately 10 folks who are going to be on that list. They're going to be guiding, being sort of like a guiding force on the actual destination stewardship plan for Visit Truckee Tahoe. I also will be sitting on that council because A, there wasn't any VTT board members on that committee. B, there wasn't anybody representing sort of the public or any elected official or really anybody like that. So I apparently am roped into that one. But it should be interesting, and in case you start to see some surveys or some other things start to come out over the next few months, Visit Truckee Tahoe is embarking on that process in the hopes of having something done soon. And I watched the Planning Commission meeting, fascinating stuff, and I think that's it. Yeah, and just been shoveling. Thanks.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Henderson?
Thank you. I'm going back a little ways here, I feel like, but I did attend one of our community plastic water bottle workshops. It was amazing, the youth that turned out, so I just wanted to share that and how they were basically unanimously supportive of a plastic bottle ban, period, not plastic water. I thought that was fascinating, so we'll see, as the community survey results. I've been at 2 energy and climate related conferences recently, so a lot on resiliency planning, decarbonization strategies for communities. Excited to be able to share some of that as we talk about our roadmap efforts, which came out of our priority setting session. Let's see here, I chatted with Kath Egan as follow-up to the last meeting about some of the Friends of the Library concerns around our goals and how those are stated. So had a conversation about that. I think that's most of it. I think that's good.
Councilmember Zabriskie?
I participated in an ad hoc committee on the July 4th fireworks event at the west end of Donner Lake. And it was very educational. It was great to see a number of different people share their views, and the list of positives and negatives associated with it is too long for me to itemize, but I'm expecting it to come to council for a lively discussion. I attended a Golden Seniors presentation by our town manager. She's handled some challenging questions adroitly and directly, coming from seniors, covering a range of topics, but mostly about seniors. And then the Good Morning Truckee had Sven left, who was just here earlier. Rob Ettenmeyer, Richard Palante, and Danny Renfro, our very own police chief, all spoke a little bit about their background and their activities and excitement about their new positions. Met with the president and the executive director for the hospital, Harry Weiss and Ted Owens, to talk about their master plan and to get a better sense of the relationship with staff and then with the substance of their master plan. Attended another TMA, the Transportation Management Association, had a meeting this morning. One of the presentations was from Placer County about the Caltrans study about expanding the Capital Corridor train all the way to Reno. And the specific focus was on getting people to the train station. And I noticed one of the things having to do with Truckee was maybe a circular shuttle, because we put our transit center a distance away from our bus depot. But the responses were really positive in terms of the interest in the Capital Corridor train from both the Bay Area and Sacramento. Bay Area people say they'd love to 60% said they want to avoid traffic and they like the comfort and the scenery of a train. So the initial responses are really good. The responses were 10 times what the pollsters expected. And the only thing I saw missing was we still need Amtrak and the Union Pacific to kind of buy in on this thing too, and we're not there yet. And then Alfred, Alfred made a presentation on the 57% increase in overall ridership since pre-COVID, And then our shared rides have increased to 58%. So we're really getting a great response in terms of getting people out of their cars. And then I met with Jessica Penman to talk about the chamber, what she envisions as their goals and what the bigger issues are for the chamber.
Thank you. Councilmember Klipstad.
Thank you. Actually, my last visitors came up on the train and they had a great time. They thought it was fantastic. Of course, it was late, but I was like, yeah, it was late. It's always late. So it wasn't a big deal to me, but they were like, oh my gosh. Hey, Jen, I know you've been working with the post office. Could I request that maybe in one of your upcoming town manager reports, you could kind of update us on that progress? Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Awesome, thank you. So I too watched the planning commission meeting, and yes, have been fielding some questions, as I know the rest of us have on that. Attended a CTA governing partners meeting where we were really trying to brainstorm ideas for the next meeting and kind of refine our pitch workshop plan. I'm really excited for the next steps of that. I attended the virtual Tahoe Forest Hospital board meeting, and during open public comment did a cordial invitation for them to join CTA as a founding member. They later in that broadcast had a inventory of their climate mitigating actions or practices, which were very informative. But I was excited to see that one of the things that they talked about was perhaps joining the CTA could be one of the next steps that they take, so I'm very hopeful there. Met with Supervisor Bullock and town staff. See, we had Erin, Hillary, and Jen there. The topic was all things green in our region, and it was a really great, almost hour and a half long discussion. We kind of couldn't stop talking about ways that we can support each other in creating a more sustainable region. We talked about the next sustainability summit and kind of how we want to work that, what ideas we have to engage people and community agency and partners. Looked at ways that we could do mutually beneficial actions and projects and programs. But mostly what happened was we shared all the things that the town of Truckee is doing. And clearly Supervisor Bullock and Ariel were very impressed and very excited about the fact that we've kind of already championed and started these things and tested the waters, at least in our community, and that we were very willing to share our lessons learned and best practices. And so I wanted to share that with the rest of you because I think we could all be really very proud of that. What we've done here, what we've accomplished here, they are very excited to start working towards implementing in a much broader region in Nevada County in general. Now, they probably won't do everything, but they were very excited about several of the things that we talked about specifically. So I look forward to seeing what comes of that. And that's about it, because I'm probably the only one in town that didn't do any shoveling over the last couple of weeks.
Oh, is that possible?
So I don't even have that cross to bear.
Next year, we'll get you next year. You can come over and help us all next year.
It'll be all me next year, I'm pretty sure.
Thank you. Just a quick, you just asked about the post office. I will share staff is working on drafting a letter to the California District 6 Regional Director of the USPS that they've been sharing with Vice Mayor and I, so working on sending that out. So just know that they've been working on a lot of that. Following up TNT, TMA that Councilmember Zabriskie reported on. Yeah, the rail study was interesting. I did also want to share, because we love our surveys in Truckee, they did mention Truckee was the city with the most respondents. So, you know, we really love our surveys. But that was exciting to see, you know, the results of that. The other piece at the TMA that Councilmember Zabriskie didn't share is there was a presentation from the app Ride Amigos, and it's a company that tries to encourage not driving your personal vehicle and helps you understand transit opportunities as well as setting up carpools. So talking about ways to get people to, you know, get out of their vehicles and incentives. And in other communities, they work with businesses. So, you know, if you carpool, then you could get a gift certificate to a business or things like that. And Palisades actually is starting a contract with them starting next week for their employees of Palisades. So it'll be interesting to see how that works and if it makes sense to expand it broader. I also attended the 4th of July meeting with Councilmember Zabriskie that he mentioned. It was impressive the amount of partners that were there: Truckee Fire, Cal Fire, VTT, Truckee Chamber, Town. I mentioned Chamber, Emily was there in her Chamber role. The Parks and Rec District, you know, it was just really good to have a good broad conversation. So just so fellow council members know, lots of different voices and input was shared, which I thought was useful. Attended the mayor-managers meeting with the mayors and managers of Grass Valley and Nevada City last week in Grass Valley. Really fun, just fun to check in with them and see what's happening in everyone else's neck of the woods. And last had a meeting with MAP last week with some town staff, MAP staff, as well as 2 of their board members. So had more conversations about the general plan. I think we've all been seeing the public comments that have been coming in asking us to prioritize some of the action items in our general plan. So that was kind of discussed, and similar things we've heard before about specificity and ensuring that we are implementing what we're saying we're going to implement. So, but overall it was a good meeting, and it was nice to have another conversation with them. And that was it. So with that, I think we will adjourn. Thank you, everybody, and get ready to shovel more this weekend.